Hi, welcome everybody to the next episode in our Making Ideas Happen webinar series. I'm Katrina, I'm part of the enterprise support team here at Oxford Brookes University, where we take your passion, put it into action and supporting anyone to make their ideas happen. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Nat Cooper, who will be giving us an introduction on how to launch a food and drink business 101. I just want to remind everybody that throughout the webinar, if you have any questions or thoughts, please make use of the Q&A feature to submit questions and the chat box for any comments or thoughts throughout. We're also going to be live streaming on our Facebook page, Enterprise Support, so do give that a like or a share or watch on Facebook if you would like to. Throughout the presentation, we'll be asking questions. So again, just do pop anything in that Q&A box for us. I think that's everything from me today. So I'm going to hand over to Nat. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Yeah, guys, I'm here to chat to you today, obviously, about launching the food and drink business. So I'm just going to go a little bit into a bit about me and then just get going straight away with the presentation. So bear with me one moment while I just make this a little bit smaller. Cool. Okay, so as I said, a little bit about me. I actually graduated from Oxford Brookes in the aftermath of the 2008 economic recession, so definitely understand how potentially some of the recent grads are feeling in terms of the employment prospects. Always fun. And I actually studied real estate management and property, but actually ended up pivoting into food and drink, which was always a passion of mine. So just really briefly, following a bit of traveling, I actually landed my first full-time role at a fast-growing coconut water brand, and this was something that kind of really solidified my interest within food and drink, but also within that kind of startup challenger brand sort of company. I then moved to Morocco for about 6 months, where I was actually working with Enterprise Nation, who are advisors or provide support for startups. I was actually working remotely in Morocco whilst doing that for 6 months, which was, again, amazing just to get another perspective. Then honed my wholesale skills and brand building skills working for a superfood chocolate brand back in the UK for a couple of years. And then off the back of that, pitching to someone, I was actually headhunted to manage and grow the sales team and the account management team for a specialty coffee brand, again in the UK. And then most recently, I've actually taken all of the things that I've learned and all of my passions, and I've actually moved into freelancing to help people either start food and drink businesses that will be successful, or giving them extra tips if they have already launched. So that is a little bit about me. I hope that's clear for everybody. I probably won't ask any questions about that because there's far more interesting bits to get onto. So cracking on with the presentation. Like I said, it's all about launching a food and drink business 101. Obviously, we've got about 45 minutes, and as you can imagine, there's quite a lot of information to cover. So I've just tried to really give the top line sort of knowledge, and then anything further, you can just shoot me some questions or we can connect a little bit later on. So in terms of the webinar format, I'm going to do a bit of an introduction to the industry, go through a few of the basics and a bit of terminology that you may or may not be aware of. Then going to go more into finding your niche market and potentially identifying different opportunities that might be around the idea that you've already got. Then it's all about developing your idea and trying to put it more into a business plan, and a couple of considerations that you need to be thinking about at that point. Testing the market, or tips for testing the market, and then kind of gathering the feedback and how you potentially use that feedback to pivot into something that you could launch. And then just the real basics for getting ready on sales and marketing, and a few sort of extra tips and things to think about when you're starting to go through that. Is that all good with everybody? I can't see the thumbs up, but I'll just keep going until someone comes back to me. So, okay. An introduction to the UK food and drink industry. So the food and drink sector itself actually contributes about 29 billion to the UK economy each year. It's actually the biggest manufacturing sector in the UK. Collectively, the food supply chain employs 4 million people. 97% of our food and drink businesses are actually SMEs. So that's either kind of startups, small businesses, and then a medium-sized business actually counts anything under, I think it's about 250 employees and around the 40 million revenue mark. This is kind of the main fact that I guess you guys will be interested in. So there are actually 1,500 new products that are launched each quarter within food and drink. So obviously super competitive. What are the different ways that you can kind of get ahead of other people that might have similar ideas or be wanting to launch new products in there? So that just gives you a bit of background information. I'm sure it's a few bits and bobs that you guys might have actually researched in anyway, but it's always just interesting to know a bit more about the industry. So essentially, dependent on who your product's for, what you kind of want to offer, and your demographic, the business model tends to sit under the two main options, which is B2B and B2C. So B2B is business to business, so it refers to selling goods to another business, and it's usually, in food and drink, it's usually done via a wholesaler or a distributor. Whereas B2C is actually business to consumer, so it tends to refer to selling goods to an individual, and again, in food and drink, it would be through an e-commerce site or a web shop. Is that clear for everybody? Obviously, there are potentially a couple of other littler or smaller kind of models out there, but these tend to be the ones that you'd either pick between, or you can actually do a bit of both in some cases. Yeah. It was really odd not hearing back and it all coming through the chat, but
sounds good so far, Nat.
Yeah, okay, cool. always hard to tell. It's quite audience. So just to go a bit more into e-commerce, obviously super popular at the moment, especially within lockdown. This has gone a bit crazy for both current food and drink businesses that are obviously trying to pivot and keep on generating revenue to keep their business alive, but also obviously people becoming aware of the popularity of e-commerce and the fact that there are more people at home willing to shop online. So I guess there's quite a lot of online food and drink subscriptions. You might just have different bundles that are appropriate for people to kind of buy into, and these tend to be quite good for I guess more functional products or products where people are buying in bulk or consistently. So a couple of the benefits of e-commerce versus a traditional B2B model would include being able to communicate directly with your customers. So you tend to have things like the online chat function. People are obviously coming to a website and you can figure out where you're potentially losing people or which pages they tend to be interested in. So it's really great for gathering insight on your customer and being able to then reach out to them. It often offers faster growth just due to the online reach. So again, if you are offering something like a coffee subscription, people are already sort of shopping that online. But also just due to the way that e-commerce works, it could be picked up from anybody all across the world. So it's got really good reach there. Online marketing tends to be pretty effective, but also trackable. So you've got obviously things like the paid post or paid social media posts, bloggers that are potentially getting things out there for you, product visibility, but also you tend to get a lot of analytics off the back of it. And that's really then valuable for kind of tweaking your business model. You've got lower operating costs and probably a quicker setup initially, especially if it's more of a drop shipping site. So you're only really having to focus on getting your web shop and your user experience to a really good level, rather than actually having to potentially open a shop, such as a cafe or a coffee shop, or actually having to kind of build up stock of a food and drink product. And then a lot of the business administration behind a web shop or an e-commerce business is actually usually integrated into the platform or the software that you're wanting to use. So things like Shopify or WordPress will already have payment platforms built in and terms and all of the kind of finances and expensing. Whereas if you do it more traditionally, then you're actually invoicing wholesalers and different type of customers, chasing payments, etc. So I've just given you guys a couple of examples down the bottom there of I guess brands that I think have done really well, both pre-lockdown, but also just should give you a little bit of inspiration. So I don't know whether you guys have heard of Beer 52. It's a craft beer delivery subscription site. So you can actually be part of a community where you discover new beers each month, or you can just buy beers as a gift, or you can just buy one-off kind of mixed crates for things like parties and events. So they're really good, and they've done some really clever stuff around building a more, I guess, consistent income from people that are actually shopping their site. You've then got Packed Coffee. That's probably the main coffee subscription service out there that's kind of really, I guess, challenged the way people think about coffee, getting them exploring different origins, a lot of education behind it, a lot of promotions to kind of get you signed up as well. They've just got a really, really strong brand. And then the last one is HelloFresh. So they are trying to encourage more people to cook different type of recipes. You would then get your ingredients kind of delivered to you. And again, very, very clever in terms of subscription, education, and building that community, and then encouraging people to share. So again, really good little bit of inspiration and a couple of the benefits there. Is that clear to everybody? I'm sure you guys probably have quite a good idea about e-commerce anyway.
Sounds good, and definitely from my perspective, something that I've been using a little bit more in the current climate. I've had a lot of Instagram advertising put my way, which resulted in me buying about 24 protein bars off of a that I needed, but I'm now enjoying, and it came in that letterbox style packaging, so it's that kind of packaging. So I know that's something that's really, really growing at the moment.
I think it's definitely very popular, and also a really great way initially of trying to get your product out there, which is why I was saying you can actually sometimes have products that are a bit of both. So you can be B2B, but you can also pivot into e-commerce as well, so that you're not so dependent on one particular part of your business. And a lot of food and drink businesses and people that I know that work within those brands have now kind of uploaded and created a really strong e-commerce model off the back of everything that's happening, because people aren't going to the same sort of shops that they were in pubs or restaurants. So always a handy one to look into. Cool. Okay, so the other part of that then, so the more B2B side, I guess, for food and drink is the wholesale sector. So this is typically where a wholesaler will buy products from you and then actually distribute your goods and your products to businesses that actually signed up to using them. So on the left hand side, of just giving a bit of a it's just a little bit of a trickier one to explain, but it tends to be you guys obviously create the products and you've got a particular margin. You then sell it on to this wholesaler, who will then take their margin or add on a bit of profit for them. They then sell it to the stockist, so someone like a coffee shop, and then the coffee shop adds on their margin and puts it out for the consumer to buy. Obviously, there's way more people involved from the beginning to the end. So that's where obviously the pricing and the margin is split between, I guess, yourself. So again, in e-commerce, you're able to just absorb a lot of the profit and control a bit more of the margin. Whereas if you're trying to go through wholesale, there's just a lot of people in the process. However, there obviously are benefits of working with a wholesaler versus e-commerce as well. So an opportunity to increase your brand visibility. Obviously, if you are wanting to go UK wide or even worldwide, being able to actually get it in front of people's faces out and about that might not necessarily always shop online or try and come to your website is really key. So if you want to be seen in places like the supermarkets and the coffee shop chains and the lunch spots and the health food shops, then you will typically have to go via a wholesaler. So that will increase your brand visibility. They'll be ordering in larger volumes and therefore typically have a higher order value. So instead of you having to sell 1,000 bars in order to be able to make a good amount of revenue or income, you're actually selling products by the case. So it tends to be a lot higher in terms of the average order value. And obviously, as you get more stockists through that wholesaler, that will just keep on increasing. And it's usually just a one drop, 1 month kind of drop off situation. So you know that your average order value might then be £1,000 per month. And then you know that you have that revenue to be able to then spend it on things like marketing and sales or hiring new people. It gives you access to the key accounts in the supermarkets and the chains. Again, typically, the key accounts that some of you guys might be targeting will only go via a wholesaler, but they'll also have a bespoke wholesaler that they like working with. It's called a nominated supplier. So if I think within food and drink and health food and drink, if you think of somewhere like Whole Foods in London, they might only have 5 nominated suppliers that they, nominated wholesalers that they want to work with. And you then have to get listed with that wholesaler in order to be able to sell to Whole Foods. So that's really great, but also kind of key if you're actually wanting access to a lot of those accounts. It also allows you to test how you measure up against those competitors. So what happens when you are actually sold in a shop that sells next to your competitor or has similar products to you? Are people picking it up more so than your competitor? What other products are working well within that environment? And then you can obviously work and pivot off the back of that. And then, like I was mentioning before, simpler logistics and distribution. So instead of you having to kind of either drop ship or pick and pack and try and fulfill each individual web shop order or e-commerce order, it tends to be that you agree on a minimum order quantity for that wholesaler. And it's just a one-drop delivery to those guys. They then obviously sort out all of the separate invoicing between each of their shops. So it's just a lot simpler as a process. Is that clear for everybody? That one's a little bit more tricky.
Just got one question, Nat, that's come in from Lillian. She said, "Thank you, Nat. Are you saying that it's better to work with wholesalers than to sell individually directly to consumers, for example, online?"
Well, so it depends on what type of product that you have. So again, with, I guess the coffee one is quite a good example. Obviously, coffee is competitive both online and via a wholesaler. If you decide that you actually want to be a product that's seen within supermarkets, or that you actually want to sell it as an ingredient for coffee shops to use and then sell on to customers, so people are experiencing the product, you're going to have to go via a wholesaler or try and sell in bulk in order to be able to get that visibility. Whereas if your idea is more just to build up, I guess, people drinking coffee at home, then you might choose the e-commerce is right for you. So it's a hard one because for some, it's kind of dependent on the product, but also what you're aiming to achieve. I'd say at the moment it's worth, obviously a lot of wholesalers and buyers are on buying freezes. So at the moment it's just quite good to try and figure out whether or not there's a way that you could monetize your idea through e-commerce first and then try setting it up for wholesalers. But basically, e-commerce is really great because it's just, like I mentioned before, direct to the customer, loads of feedback, loads of analytics, but you're probably having to sell individual units, so it might potentially take you longer in order to be able to get to the income or revenue levels that you're aiming for. Whereas within a wholesaler, you're selling by the case, so you're already selling maybe 10 bars more than you would on an e-commerce site, but then you have to do the work in order to make sure that people are actually picking it up off the other end. Does that make sense? It's a bit of a tricky one because it's kind of it's product and idea pending rather than just setting which one's better.
Right. Yeah, just pop something else in, Lillian, if you had any more questions. I've just got another one on wholesale as on it. So Richa asks, how do you actually find a wholesaler and convince them to work with you?
What was the second part of that? How do you find a wholesaler and convince them
to work with you?
Yeah, good question. The question on everyone's lips. So in terms of finding the wholesaler, again, if you have a particular product that you know is appropriate for a certain type of shop. So say I had say I had a superfood snack bar, that I might then think that one of the most appropriate places to start with that might be a health food shop. You can actually walk into your local health food shop. Obviously, maybe not so much at the moment, but you might be able to give them a call or message them, and ask them which wholesalers that they tend to work with in order to be able to order their products in store. And most of them will just tell you, especially if you said, I'm working on a new idea for a superfood bar, just wondering who you work with. You can actually Google it as well. So I think there's a couple of kind of like wholesale websites that will break down a wholesaler within food and drink for different categories. So you might have some wholesalers that are specifically for farm shop and deli customers that then might want things like jams and marmalades and I guess more premium artisan products. There might be other people that are more towards hotels, contract catering, ingredients, kind of whatever you need. But yeah, they give it a Google, ask the account directly, and try and connect with other people within your industry or that sell food products, and ask them who their favorite wholesalers are to work with. And that's often a way that you can find them in the first place. The second bit is the $1 million question: how you can convince them to work with you. I guess a lot of it is you understanding, and we go through it a little bit more in the presentation anyway, but it's about you understanding where you're adding value for both the wholesaler and for the stockist, proving the demand for the product and the supply. So not necessarily just something that you're really passionate about. It has to be things that a product that other people will want to pick up. But I guess then you can actually use if you weren't kind of product testing at things like markets and I guess giveaways, you can actually now use the stats of your e-commerce business, or if you manage to sell a few bits and bobs online, you can actually use the stats of that now and give those to the wholesaler and say, hey, look, within lockdown period of this new product, I actually managed to sell 1,000 units over 2 months, majority within the London area. That's where your accounts are. I think we're a great match. But I go through a few other little tips later on in terms of approaching the buyer that will cover that for you.
Great, thank you.
Groovy? Yeah, all good. Let's move away from wholesale. It's quite a large area. So the sales channels, if someone talks to you about a sales channel, a channel is a group of similar retailers that help you reach your target demographic. So again, dependent on your product or your idea, it might work within one specific channel or it might work across multiple channels. I'm going to break down the channels, but then I'll try and give, I guess, a bit of an example product. So first of all, if you hear off-trade, some people sometimes break it up into the supermarkets separately, so it would be the grocers. But off-trade tends to be the big supermarkets, the hypermarkets, and a lot of the convenience store chains. So things like Londis and Spar and Nice's would sit under the off-trade. You've then got QSR, so that stands for quick service restaurants and coffee chains. So that might be things like Leon, it might be things like Costa, like Nero, and companies like that. So that's just a different category in itself, and that can also be branded products. So ones that are packaged up ready for the consumer, or it could be you might have an ingredient that they might be able to use within their own brand menu. You've then got Horeca, which kind of covers hotels, restaurants, and then cafes and catering. This can also then be split up even further. So you might hear food service a bit that kind of covers catering. You might hear about travel as well. So that might go more into kind of airlines and train catering. But this is kind of the main category. And then the last one is forecourts. So this will be petrol and motorway services. So that they're kind of give you a bit of a different idea. Obviously, these channels then kind of split further down. So like I said, hotels are very different from restaurants in terms of the wholesaler, but also what that buyer might be looking for within those particular products. In terms of giving you an example, I might just say, yeah, so if you've developed a product that's kind of appropriate for a minibar, so say you've developed a low alcoholic alternative spirit that you actually only sell in those little mini bar bottles, you might literally just launch just into hotels, because it's kind of appropriate in the way that you bottled it and the way that you branded it. But you might then actually be able to branch out into the off trades, into supermarkets, if you've proven success within hotels. So you can kind of jump across different channels, or you might just say, no, I just really want to focus on Michelin star restaurants because I've got that particular type of product that's only going to be appropriate for them. So it's kind of up to you, again, on the product or the idea. Also, you might think that it's appropriate in a particular channel, and then when you actually test it, you might figure out that you actually tend to get a response, or you're getting a load of leads coming into you from a different channel. So again, just listen. Don't be necessarily closed off to a channel just because you don't think it doesn't work there. So everyone clear with that? Has anyone got any questions on channels?
I think we're okay.
No, that's all pretty clear. Okay, so in terms of finding the gap in the market, I guess I've just tried to, again, give a bit of inspiration to get you kind of evolving your idea, or even coming up with an idea that might fit across a couple of these different areas. So first of all, I always just think it's good to start off by thinking about your strengths, your interests, and your values, rather than just, oh, I want to launch a food and drink product to sell it in a couple of years and make loads of money. That is extremely difficult to do, given the amount of new products that are launching. So always just better to think about what impact you actually want to make on food and drink, and you're actually more likely to stick with it if it's an area that you're interested in. So again, if you're really into health and well-being, you're going to come across way more passionately in both, I guess, any sort of presentation. You're going to understand the customer a little bit more, and it's going to be a little bit easier for you to develop a product, rather than something you aren't necessarily the customer of, or you don't really shop that category anyway. Make a list of specific problems that you think need to be solved within food and drink, or that the industry is kind of saying that there needs to be change. One of the two major areas that I guess there's a gap at the moment, or kind of trend areas that I think are worth focusing on, is sort of purpose-led or mission-led brands. A lot of the big groups and the grocery accounts, and a lot of the kind of big businesses are keen to prove that they're doing something good, and they're, I guess, reducing impact, whether or not it's environmental. So they're trying to work with food and drink products that actually focus on reducing food waste or packaging, or don't use plastic, or it's plant-based food, more ethical supply chains. That's always quite a good area. I guess the other trend area is, I guess this focus on, the trend area that I think is quite popular at the moment is people are drinking less alcohol. So is there a way of actually tapping into the seed-lit market and trying to look at the kind of low percentage, low alcoholic versions, and then pairing that with, I guess, healthier flavors or healthier ingredients as well. So try and make a list of specific problems or areas that are kind of cropping up from changes in, I guess, the way that people drink and eat, and then think about where your products might fulfill that need. The other area, which is always an interesting one, is, are there any categories that lack innovation or that need updating? Often one that people don't really think about, but actually there's so many areas within food that are kind of dominated by the core brand and the heritage brand within that category, where nothing really has changed for ages. I think one great example of that is there's actually a nut butter brand called Pip and Nuts. Pip's great. She's I've known her for quite a few years now, and she looked at the peanut butter category within supermarkets or within food shops, and everything was very samey. There wasn't really any other nut butters that were available. It was very much the kind of Sunpat dominated, no real transparency on the ingredients. And all she's done there is basically just added a bit of innovation. So she has launched peanut butter, but she's used a higher peanut percentage, no palm oil, very clever modern branding and then branched out into different nut butters. That's a really great way of trying to figure out whether or not you've got a product that can do something similar. So check her out for inspiration. And then the last one is using research and market insight to identify trends and brands that are doing popular brands that are doing well elsewhere. So the States is always quite a good place to look just for a bit of inspiration for new products that might then filter through to the UK market. A lot of their, I guess, low alcoholic sort of sparkling seltzers at the moment are quite popular out there, but they tend to have quite a lot of trends that then end up coming over to the UK. The same as Australia, and the same as bits of Asia as well, and bits of Europe. So try and look into that and see what else is working elsewhere, whether or not anyone's doing it over here, and whether or not that kind of fits in with where, I guess, your strengths lie and your interests lie. That's hopefully a bit of inspiration for you. Has anyone got any questions off the back of that? No, we all good?
At the moment, really interesting.
Inspired out. That's how I would do it if I was trying to come up with a food and drink product to launch. Just looking at all these areas. Okay, I'll move on to the next bit. Hopefully you can see this because it looks a little bit bright on here. But when people talk about challenge a brand, it's quite a nice term these days for, I guess, new food and drink startups. But it tends to kind of be within that category, like I was mentioning, the brands that are actually adding and tweaking and innovating a bit of a stagnant area, and then challenging the large companies in the way that they do things. And it tends to be a really great area of food startups, just because you can get really passionate about it. And there's also so many awesome brands that have recently launched that kind of fit within that. So I've just highlighted a couple of them for you guys to, again, get inspiration from, see how they've done it, super clear on the messaging and the branding and where they sort of sit. So Moju Drinks over here, they actually basically have kind of created a separate category in themselves. So they actually launched with cold pressed juice, which is obviously quite a tricky market to dominate, just because there's so much out there, but also it requires a bit of education as to what the difference in quality would be of cold press versus the smoothies and the juices that supermarkets would do. They actually launched these little shots, kind of functional shots based on what that shot and those ingredients might do. So it might be energize, it might be boost, it might be relax, whatever it is, but they've absolutely nailed it. And yeah, they now kind of sit in a category by themselves, which is kind of exactly where you want to be if your product's flying off shelves. These guys, this is a vegan, plant-based alternative meat brand, I guess. So they do kind of fake chicken and other products, and they've just been very clever. They actually hadn't done any marketing or reached any buyers. They hadn't done any outreach and contacting buyers. They just focused on marketing initially, and the marketing was so successful that they actually got listed with a bunch of supermarkets right from the get-go, without actually doing any outreach or any field sales or anything like that, which is pretty crazy. So they're a good one to look at. Big Drop Brewing, it's a 0% booze brand. They're growing really fast, so check out what those guys are kind of focusing on. Very clever branding, very clear message as well. And then a couple of others here is Dash Water, which I absolutely love. They use wonky fruit and veg, full transparency, low calorie, great branding, very clear message. And the two guys that started it are very, very passionate about reducing food waste, which works quite well at the moment. That's that purpose-driven piece. Rubies and the Rubbers, pretty similar to Dash in that they use wonky fruit and veg that's rejected by supermarkets and turn it into relish and marmalades and ketchups and things like that. It's really cool. So yeah, highlighted a couple there, but just check them out for a bit of inspiration and see how they've challenged their category, and then what you could do similarly with your product. Does that make sense to everybody? Sorry, I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking. I suppose that's the point of the webinar, right?
That's all right, Nat. It's all good.
All good. Okay. So in terms of your idea to a business plan, so if you're kind of going through all of this and you think you've actually got quite far down the road from initial idea to kind of a bit more research about it, and then really thinking that you're onto something, asking other people, I guess, and they've kind of clarified that for you. A business plan is a really great way of just setting out your goals, calculating the finance that you might need, and putting a plan in place to make it a reality. There's quite a lot of people that can come up with the ideas, but it never actually turns into anything. So even just by writing things down on paper and having to go through that process, it really encourages it. There are loads of free templates that you can use online. If you literally just type in business plan, even food and drink business plan template, it will just go through the main components that you should be thinking about when you're actually trying to capture this information. I think the most important thing for me to kind of realize, to tell you guys, but also for you to realize, is that the idea of the business plan isn't that it's just kind of a one-off document that you create at the beginning and then it kind of just gets pulled out every quarter or every year just to see how you're doing against it. It should actually be like a workable document that you can use to help you make decisions that kind of fit with what you were aiming to do in the first place. It's very easy when you're kind of growing a business or momentum sort of building, or you're getting interest, to kind of just be quite scatty in your approach and forget why you maybe started it in the first place, or really stick to your values. So that's just really important. So make sure that you've got it in your head that it's a workable document. It's not just the admin before you start. So the first kind of area that you'll be covering will just be, again, your skills, trying to build a bit more of a story as to like why you want to start something. Why is it this product? Why would somebody care about what you're doing and be interested in about what you have to say? The second bit is who's actually going to buy it, your products, the USPs versus competitors. I see also quite a lot of people within the kind of USP area sort of saying, oh yeah, my product just tastes so much better. It tends to not, I mean, I can believe you because some products do taste so delicious versus the competitors, but taste alone isn't going to be enough in order to be able to convince both buyer and consumer when there's so much choice. But also, in order for them to actually be able to taste it and agree with you, they have to buy it in the first place. So there has to be something else there. So it might be that it's lower calorie than anything else out there if you're targeting that type of customer. It might be that it's brewed in a particular way, or that it's a limited edition, or it's got a unique new ingredient. Whatever it is, just make sure that just taste or quality alone isn't the kind of main focus as to why people are going to be picking that up. And then the last one is how you're actually going to market and sell your products and all the costs that are involved in that. Whether or not you do the B2B or the B2C, how much investment are you going to have to make? I really do think that you don't actually, with a lot of products, you don't actually have to spend crazy amounts of money from the get-go. There's actually also a really great book called The Lean Startup. If you guys haven't read it, or you've got that kind of idea and you maybe haven't got investment or that much cash to spare to get this idea going, that's a great book for it. But yeah, how break it down, how you're actually going to sell it, where you're going to put it, how you're going to promote it, and what you're going to have to do in order to be able to finance it. Is that quite clear to everybody? Yes.
Yeah, we've got makes perfect sense.
Makes perfect sense. Great. Wow, that's great feedback. Awesome. Okay. So a couple of ideas for testing your product then. With food and drink especially, the easiest way to find out whether or not people would actually buy your product is to just get people tasting it and potentially educating them about the different benefits or how it differs from your competitors. It's another great thing that I really love about working within food and drink, especially if you know you've got a super tasty product, that actually when you get in front of people and you get that clarification that it is as good as you think it is, it always motivates you a lot better. I have picked products that I really love as well, so that and that all my family and friends tend to enjoy, so that that's been very beneficial. So first of all, yeah, you can get feedback from family and friends. especially if you've got family and friends that kind of sit within your demographic, or they're actually already buying maybe a competitor of yours, just to just getting feedback from them. Just be aware that obviously your family and some of your friends might not want to tell you the truth because you're really excited about your idea. So just try to make it not so personal, I guess, to you, and just really be open to all different types of feedback that you're getting from them. The second is to approach consumers within your target market. So there might actually be your local health food shop that you could actually say, oh, I'm working on a couple of recipes for a healthier protein ball, and recipes that I've kind of come up with. Could I maybe come in one Saturday and just chop up a couple of samples and just ask your customers as to what they think about it? That's always a really great way to do it. Again, post lockdown, or even just kind of before this crazy situation, you could have gone to a couple of markets and even just given away stuff for free. Obviously, the famous innocent smoothie story was the guys went to a market and they had two bins either side of their table, and got loads of people to test the smoothie samples. And one bin said, "Your smoothie was amazing. Give up your full-time jobs." And the other bin was like, "No, stick to your day job. This smoothie tastes crap." And obviously the smoothie tasting amazing bin was absolutely rammed full. People absolutely loving it, and that's off the back of what happened. They then launched innocent smoothie. So that's a little bit of inspiration for you there. I think anonymous testing as well. So not everyone will want to actually give bad feedback to your face, especially if they know that you're the founder. So sometimes just by putting out products within a shop with a leaflet, and kind of, even if you are there saying that you're potentially not the founder, you're kind of just working on behalf of the brand, you might get a little bit more genuine feedback. But so people don't really want to be crushing dreams, but that anonymous feedback's so key to actually just figuring out what people do and don't like. And then you can do things like focus groups, surveys, and prototype testing. So again, with kind of those recipes, and again, probably not necessarily in lockdown, but you might be able to get a group of people together that are, I don't know, all runners, and they regularly use protein supplements, and you might have something that's related to that, and you could just ask whether or not that local running club could test out your products and do a little survey off the back of it. So just a couple of ways to test it, mainly with food and drink. It's just getting it out there to the right people and just getting as much feedback as possible from them. Is that clear to everybody? Yes.
Big thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Cool. Okay. So obviously, generating income and converting sales is going to be a massive part of making your business a success. There are a few things that you actually have to do to kind of plan ahead so that you don't miss a potential sales opportunity. A lot of founders kind of get to chatting to a wholesaler or a buyer, and then the buyer kind of turns around and says, "Yeah, all right, we'll take 100 cases," and actually they haven't got the key background stuff ready, and then it either slows things down, or you can kind of lose a bit of momentum and buyer's interest. So these are pretty key to think about. So the first one is know your COGS. So that's your cost of goods. Any volume price breaks that you might get in terms of, if you've got hazelnuts and you're only using a certain amount, how many bars do you need to sell in order to be able to get that next price drop? Your case and your unit pricing, and then what RRP that you're actually aiming for. So the slide previously that kind of spoke about the wholesaler and the kind of margin expectations, or the split across the product, the wholesaler, the consumer, all of that kind of stuff is the stuff that you need to know, because you're selling into a wholesaler, and you're trying to achieve the end RRP. But also knowing your cost of goods. Don't just kind of pluck a price out the air. You're actually trying to hold as much margin as possible in the early days, in order to be able to then reinvest a bit of that income in other areas. The second bit is to kind of get all your nutritionals, allergens, and shelf life tested and confirmed in advance. So again, don't kind of rush this stuff, because it can lead you into trouble. further down the line. Again, you can just Google a lot of this stuff for getting like food products nutritionally tested. You have to send away your kind of end product within the packaging that you're anticipating using, and then people would test it for things like gluten and dairy and peanuts and whatnot. So definitely get that confirmed before, and just know where you stand with things. The same as making sure that all your food safety, health and safety and ethical credentials are up to date. Don't start saying that you're an organic crisp company without actually getting the organic certification, or at least finding out how to get it once you've actually got a larger order. So just be aware of that, because it just makes you look pretty shifty if you haven't got all of that stuff ready to go. And then the last thing is packaging and your product specs. So are you actually retail ready? Have you looked into things like barcodes, the legal information that you need on the back and front of pack, what type of material you're actually using? Is it appropriate for that type of product? At the coffee company we used to work for, if you didn't have there's like a little valve on the back of a coffee bag for beans especially, but ground coffee. Sometimes if you didn't have that valve on the back, then the packaging can actually explode just due to the gas that the coffee releases once you've roasted it. So some wholesalers might require you to have something that specific, or a retailer might want you to have something that specific. So there's actually a bit of a safety off the back of the packaging. So make sure you're kind of covering all areas. It's not just about chatting to a buyer, them saying yes, and then you just trying to figure out all of this afterwards. Is that clear?
Yep, all good.
Yep. Obviously, I'm not a. Oh yeah. Sorry, what was that?
Just saying, just conscious that we're coming sort of just over the 45 minutes, but don't
worry. All good. We're on to the last few ones actually, so we should be
amazing.
Okay, so engaging with a buyer, like I said briefly before, obviously once you've kind of got your idea and your product and your business plan and all your sales stuff ready, you're going to be wanting to obviously approach either buyers for wholesalers or for those shops. And there's a couple of key areas to sort of think about in this process. So being clear about your target market, who your main channels are, your USPs and the problem that you're solving is really, really important, because if you don't know what problem you're solving and who your customer is, don't necessarily think that the buyer will understand your product or that they'll work it out on your behalf. Secondly is always personalize your outreach message and mention the specifics of why you want to work with them. I.e., it might be that you've got proven demand within that channel from your web shop sales. You might be quite similar to brands that they've recently listed, or they might have just put out a CSR statement saying they're really passionate about reducing food waste, and your brand might actually be connected to that. But don't be one of these people that kind of just says, "Dear sir, madam, I've got a really great chocolate bar that will work really well in your shop. I think it's great because XYZ, please list it." Just always be a bit more specific to the business and to them. Try and use any sort of data and sales stats to prove that you've got a demand and that you can reach a decent, that's a rate of sale. That means rate of sale. So yeah, anything that you've kind of got from the industry or from other kind of similar products to prove that there is demand for that and it's growing. The less risk for them, the better. They don't tend to try and start trends. They kind of want a little bit more from you beforehand. And then show you're aware of, I guess, the aftercare, the account management, not just always just the selling. So things like promotions, things like field sales, POS is point of sale. So it's things like posters and sampling and signs in the door, and then marketing support. That will always just fare better with the buyer because they know that you're in it for the long run. Is that clear to everybody? Sorry, I feel like that's some of that stuff is what I said previously. I'm on to the last 2 slides, Kat, so
that's fine.
Before I get hush. But yeah, that's that's kind of the engaging with the buyer and things to think about. And then a few things in terms of marketing. again, other than social media, which tends to be the main thing that people jump on when they're trying to launch a new product, there are a couple of great ways to market your brand and product without having to spend a large amount of money. So the first one is try and set up a review process or referral link on your web shop or on your website, just to kind of get people writing that up there, and encouraging sharing is always really great. The second one might be to run a giveaway or a prize on social media, and then it's a great way of collecting email addresses for you then to be able to use within a newsletter to share new products, do the surveys with people that are already engaged with your brand, or tell them about new things that you're up to. Third one would be you can actually send samples, early samples, to buyers and to journalists for feedback as well. Obviously, the journalist one can be a little bit riskier if you are already kind of at the end of the process and then they say that they think the packaging's rubbish or something like that. But always quite nice to engage them early on just to get their feedback, and they might be more willing to write about you than when you're a little bit further down the line. And then the last one is try and focus on inbound marketing to generate leads. So by inbound marketing, I mean you're creating valuable content for your demographics, so much so that they actually want to come to you and try and buy your product without you really having to do the additional sell. So you can actually create really, really creative content that would build that passion. Brewdog are great at this. They're a beer company. They've gone heavy on education for craft beer versus, I guess, commodity or a bit more of the kind of generic beer brands that you see out there, encouraging people to kind of drink and appreciate beer in a different way. And all of that content that they create then just means that they're bringing more people to the website that then want to be a part of that community, shop that category and be involved within that brand. So I get the inbound marketing bit and the creating content bit is probably the main one to focus on early on. And that's the end of my presentation. I feel like I just went a few minutes over, quite a big topic to cover in quite a short period of time, but hopefully that was useful. So
no, everything made perfect sense, and that was really interesting. I think we've got time for just one or two questions, but anything more than that, Nat's got up her contact details here, so if you wanted to reach out with her for any further questions, then I'm sure she's more than happy for you to drop her a line. And hopefully this presentation has really laid some foundations for any food and drink ideas that you have, myself included. So do we have any questions, burning questions that you'd like to ask Nat before we go? I can see that we had...
While the questions are coming in, I'm just gonna quickly chime in and say that was brilliant, and it's very, very insightful personally as well, and thank you for being with us here today. Giving us that valuable insight. Just want to plug in and say there's going to be a lot more webinars coming up, which deal specifically with certain factors, which Katrina will also let you know about before she signs off. I think we have another question, Kat.
Yep. So we've got, from your experience, what would be the biggest piece of advice or words of wisdom for anybody who wants to start up their own food business?
Oh, blimey. Okay. Yeah. Wow. I think I guess the main one for when you're actually thinking about whether or not it's feasible, in terms of, kind of just future-proofing an idea, I think the main things to think about would be scalability. So if it is something that you're kind of making yourself within your kitchen, realistically, how big could you actually grow that? And then what's it going to take in order to be able to then get it made in a factory? So that's always just one to think about early on, because quite often people love kind of making it homemade, but then actually when they step up to a factory, it kind of loses the appeal or it changes the flavor. So scalability. And then I guess the second one is like, be aware of the cost of education for your product. So if you are picking an ingredient that is brand new or a product that is kind of not really out there at the moment, it's going to take a lot more money and a lot more time in order to be able to educate people as to what it actually is. So I think that, again, there's quite a few companies out there that have maybe launched with amazing products, but they don't have the finance to be able to push the education. So I think scalability and education early on, just being aware of those, would make it give you a higher chance of being a success.
Wonderful, thank you. And our final question, which I think is a great one to leave on, what do you think might be the next big food or drink trend, especially post-COVID?
Am I getting shares in this future company? Because I think I might want to. Well, like I was saying, I think for me, the one that is probably kind of standing out at the moment, and one that I actually mentioned a bit before, is the kind of alcoholic, what they're calling seltzers. So it's more of natural sparkling water, or kind of a lower calorie, lower sugar soft drink with alcohol. So those kind of tins that you get with like a G&T or vodka and cola pre-mixed. They're essentially trying to take, I guess, liquor or spirits and try and mix it more with naturally infused sparkling waters or lower calorie versions. And I think that's gone massive in the States. There's a few that are starting to crop up now in the UK, but I think that's a very interesting space to be in at the moment. So
Great.
that's my word. That's my, yeah. I need shares in whatever comes out of that.
That's okay. Somebody has just commented on a few other similar drinks brands that you might want to check out as well, which is really helpful. I know I said that was the last question, but have we got time for one more?
Oh, right.
And then this will be the last one, I promise.
Yeah, go for it.
I think it can end on if you've got the time.
Yeah.
So Freya says, do you have any specific advice on how to set up your brand, or on how to set your brand up well against competition as a food service business? So for e.g. as a restaurant or cafe.
Against others. For a restaurant or a cafe, I'm very much I guess I'm very much under the idea that if there's an extra purpose or a particular reason as to why you've actually started that is your point of difference of somebody else starting a restaurant that might just be doing it for money, or I guess it's just because they've kind of always wanted to do it, but they're not necessarily that passionate about it. So I guess trying to find the why as to why you're doing it, and then what within that actually makes you different. Just off the back of that, there's an amazing TED talk from Simon Sinek that is The Power of Why. Honestly, watch that, and then off the back of that, you'll get an idea of, if I'm trying to launch a coffee shop business, what is different from another coffee shop business, because it's you that's creating it, and then you should be able to pull something out of that.
Brilliant. Thank you for that recommendation. Hope you'll get a lot. So again, thank you, Nat, for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar. If you want to find out anything more about enterprise support, then go and give us a follow on social media. And we've also got all of our webinars, which will be listed on our website, brooks.oc.uk/enterprise. So you can check out those on there. We're actually kicking off our graduate webinar series tomorrow, so I hope you'll join me back again for that. And next week we're going to be joined by Corkin Architectural Studio, who will be talking about how to craft a successful team. So that's all from me. Thank you again, Nat.
No worries.
Have a lovely day.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Take care.